Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Access Higher Ed, the show that focuses on education here in the Berkshires, but also beyond. I'm your host, Christina Wynn, Dean of Enrollment Management at Berkshire Community College, and I'm so excited for our show today. We are going to be talking about the turf field, the brand new turf field at Berkshire Community College, which opened just a few months ago. And two of our guests have been longtime supporters and participants in creating the turf field at the college, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So first up, my good friend, my colleague, Beth Wallace.
Hi, I'm Beth Wallace. I'm the Dean of Students at Berkshire Community College, and I'm fortunate enough to be the person that oversees the turf field. And it's just been an amazing project for the college, and we're grateful to all involved who brought it to us.
That's right, and that's a great transition because Mike MacDonald.
My name is Mike MacDonald. I'm a local lawyer and a volunteer on the project since about 2011.
Wow, 2011, and now we're 2018. Correct. So as you think about that time that has passed, most people probably would assume, a turf field, like you think about it, you find the money for it, and you build it. It would take a year, 2 years, right? So what happened?
One would have thought, when I first got called and asked to be involved, I figured 6 months to raise the money, another 6 months to build it, and we'd be done. We had a little bit more of a rocky road than that, so it took, at the end of the day, 7 years. It took about twice as much money as we initially thought. When I first asked, well, how much money do we need to raise? They said, well, probably $1.5 million. Well, it ended up being about $3.2 million that we needed to raise. That includes money to replace the carpet in another 10 to 12 years, depending upon how long that lasts.
So you just said something very interesting that I don't think most people think about when they think about a field. You use the word carpet.
Yes.
Right. So when you think about a turf field versus a natural field, can you talk about the differences between the two? I don't think most people necessarily know the differences.
Sure. Natural grass field is just that. Natural grass, it's been, the surface has been leveled and crowned in the middle, but you've got natural grass to deal with. So you're dealing with mowing, you're dealing with fertilizing and caring for that surface. The turf field has basically a subsurface drainage system in it that collects any of the water that passes through the carpet. The carpet is about 1 inch to 1.5 inch fibers with holes in the carpet so the water passes through. And then there's an infill that goes between the carpet to hold the fibers up and to make it play like a natural grass field. It is, however, far more durable, which is one of the reasons that we really needed this field, is that it can be played on as many times a day as there are hours in the day, and it doesn't wear out like grass.
Yeah. And our staff, because it is carpet, what we refer to is, we are very careful on the type of equipment that we use on the field. For example, the football chains had to be specially done for turf field so that we don't want to, as you would at home, not put anything spiky in your carpet. We are very careful with that.
There's the chains, meaning those
the chains with the
for the first down
for the
things?
first down. Yeah.
Okay.
They make special
I'm
ones.
Showing my ignorance here, guys.
No, I learned. They make special ones for turf fields. We got new soccer goals that are specially made for turf fields so that there's nothing that will dig into the carpet, if you will. And also there's absolutely no food, and that is patrolled really well. But just for the drainage, for an example, as you know, we've had a lot of rain, but that field is dry in about 15 minutes. It's amazing.
15 minutes?
It's amazing. And sometimes sooner, depending on the amount of rain, but
wow.
It is absolutely, the drainage system, people are in awe when they come out to play if it's been raining during the day and it's dry. It's amazing.
So Beth, you've been with Berkshire Community College for a couple years. We'll leave the exact amount for you. But you've been with the college for a number of years, and we previously had a field in that location.
Yes.
So can you talk to us about what you were seeing prior to the new turf field?
A lot of cancellations, particularly this fall. We've had a especially wet fall, and many of the games, our games or any of the city games that may have played there, wouldn't have happened because of the turf field. And as a matter of fact, and so that was a good thing. And just the upkeep from our maintenance staff on trying to either keep it dry or mow it, or it just would have been impossible. And during the playoff season of soccer, our phone was ringing off the hook, and we were actually squeezing schools in where we could because their fields were all underwater. So that was really nice.
So Mike, when you were approached, right, 7 years ago, what was it that made you feel like, yes, I want to get involved, and what has this field and this endeavor really meant to you?
Well, there were a couple of reasons. Number one, back in 1989, myself and a gentleman named Bob Newton started the lacrosse program here in the Berkshires. There were no other teams here to play, so we had to travel outside the area. And every year that I coached, for the 4 years that I coached, we put children on a field in a live game, and they hadn't played on a field yet. We were playing in parking lots or in gyms because we have a little bit longer winters here in the Berkshires than down in the valley, in the Connecticut Valley over in New York. So that told me about the need all that time ago. In addition, when I got the call, it was people I really couldn't say no to. Gary Bianchi is a good friend, and one of my former partners, now Judge John Agostini. And that fall, to Beth's point, that fall, 85% of the games, football games, scheduled to be played were not played either on the day they were scheduled or on the field on which they were scheduled, because that year, like this past year, was particularly wet. It was the year I think we had Hurricane Sandy and so forth.
Yep.
And so there was a need to be able to have these fields be playable.
Wow. And you think about when you say 85% of the games being canceled, not only does that have, implications for logistics, right? But like those athletes must just be chomping at the bit to want to go out and compete in a game and sports that they really love. So that must really be very, very difficult for them as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I at the Berkshire Kickoff Classic, which was our first event on the field. It's a 2-day or 2.5-day kickoff to the soccer season, and I was there that evening on Friday evening, and the pride in those parents watching their children, all ages, because it's a I think it's from 8 to 18. They were so excited to think that, and we've always had the Berkshire Kickoff Classic as long as I can remember at the college, and it was just so different. And then the first football game where Taconic was on the field, and the pride in those parents they couldn't believe it. And I just sort of walked up and down the walkway, and it was awesome. I mean, it's something that we really needed, and it's one of those things you didn't know you needed it, and now that you have it, you how did we live without it?
Right.
That's how I can describe it.
So part of this project was some environmental remediation.
Yes.
And I think that when folks from the outside approached our president, then Paul Roberta, and then Ellen Kennedy has since taken on, that was really important to the college. So can you talk a little bit about why the environmental aspect was so important as part of this particular project?
Sure. So if you go back to when the original grass field that we've now replaced was built, there was obviously some earthwork done to create the field. And looking back, and understand that environmental laws have changed over time as well. So looking back, there were some impacts from the building of the original field that impacted bordering lands subject to flooding, that impacted the natural flow of water toward the wetlands, basically from West Street out to the brook system, stream system that's on the backside of the field. So that was an issue that was of concern, particularly to the environmental faculty at the college. They had a particular view with regard to that. And we committed as part of the project. So when we talk about the turf field, we're talking not just about a field, but we're talking about 5 separate and distinct environmental projects that restored historic flows to the wetlands, removed certain materials that were deposited there during the construction of the original field, so that we've put things back to the way nature had them before the original field was built.
I like to call that particular part of the project the win-win. I might be a little biased because of my last name, but I think it's a win-win situation.
We think so as well.
Yes.
I think the faculty, the environmental faculty has been tremendously supportive.
Yes.
They've overseen this process to make sure that the end result was what they had envisioned, and they've expressed real happiness with the end result.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we haven't talked about just yet, and we would be remiss if we didn't, is that the turf field has a very special name.
It does. Jean D'Elia Field.
And can you talk a little bit about the man, the myth, the legend, Jean D'Elia?
Well, Jean, I think everyone in the Berkshires understands that Jean has been just a supporter of just about everything. He has, in particular, been a big supporter of the college. He's the president of the foundation. But that's not the reason that the field was really named after him. One of our major donors, the Feigenbaum Foundation, named after Donald and Armand Feigenbaum. Jean played a particular special role with those two gentlemen toward the end of their lives. And so the foundation board really wanted to honor him for his relationship to the Feigenbaums, but also for his relationship and support of the community over his entire lifetime.
And that was a very, very special day when we had the opportunity to cut the ribbon. We have some photos that
Really
we can
was.
show from that day. When folks in the studio, we want to cue those up so we can take another look. But it was a moment where I think Jean was beaming from side to side. So talk a little bit about the photo that we're seeing right now on your screens.
This was the ribbon cutting. Great day. This was when the field name was first publicly announced. We had a ribbon cutting, and about 10 minutes later, there were soccer players all over the field, and about half an hour later, the first game of the Kickoff Classic was played.
They were basically kicking us off the field
They
right
were.
after
They
this
were.
press event. I think we have a couple more photos. So can you talk a little bit about the lines?
Sure. The field was designed to be played for soccer, which is one set of lines, football another set of lines, and both men's and women's lacrosse. And men's and women's lacrosse have different field dimensions and different lines, so they are lined for all of those sports.
That's great. And I think we have 2 more photos left. Actually, I'll be honest with you. I took this photo. It happens to be the Sunday after the kickoff, the ribbon cutting, and this was the Berkshire Community College soccer team, which I think most people didn't know that BCC has a soccer team, but we do. And they were playing for the very first time on this field. And as you can tell from the photo, it was a phenomenal sunset on a beautiful evening. And I can tell you all the people that were around me in those bleachers were saying, this field is just beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, even this doesn't really capture it. I think we got one more.
There's Jean.
There's Jean
And
and
the
And
money
President
shot.
Kennedy.
And we had quite a few student athletes, which you can see both Pittsfield High and Taconic High School players were at the event. So that's President Kennedy standing with Jean D'Elia with ginormous scissors, Mike MacDonald, and then Tricia Farley-Bouvier just behind him, with lots of others behind supporting and taking photos, and just a beautiful day.
Yeah, it was.
Great day.
It was great. Really exciting.
Thank you guys for showing us those photos. So when it comes to the field, there was some question that turf might be controversial. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Sure. As we were launching this project, NBC News picked up on a story out of Washington State that had to do with concerns and that exposure to the crumb rubber. So part of the infill, I mentioned the grass and the infill is 50% crumb rubber. In our instance, it's a particular kind of crumb rubber. It's encapsulated. We'll talk about that later. But crumb rubber and sand makes up the infill. So there was a coach, women's soccer coach in Washington State that had experienced a series, I think 4 of her goalies over a course of 10 years contracted various kinds of cancer. She thought that odd, and she thought that maybe it had something to do with the crumb rubber. That got picked up by NBC News right about the time we were starting. So we committed very early on, we're going to go with an alternate because however that issue plays out, we didn't want it to impact either the field construction itself or the perception from parents and students about its use and the safety of its use. We're now 7 years later, so we can now say that with regard to crumb rubber, there's not yet a single study anywhere in the world, and this has been studied extensively, that attributes exposure to crumb rubber on playing field surfaces to any kind of illness, except 12% of the population has a latex sensitivity and they get sort of a rash. But otherwise, no extensive proof. The state of Washington, DEP, did an extensive study and concluded that, in fact, turf fields are safer from a personal exposure standpoint than natural grass fields because of the use of the chemicals to fertilize the field, et cetera. So that was an issue raised. It's something that we committed to address right out of the gate. We spent an extra $80,000 to encapsulate the crumb rubber. That does a couple of things. That means that it doesn't dust, so no constituent comes out, even though we've now shown that there's no constituent that's of concern. And secondly, to the extent that we do have people that have a latex sensitivity, there's now a barrier between the rubber and the individual. So that was something we committed to early on and we kept to.
That's great. There was some controversy. I remember at the time when we had announced, like you said, and people were concerned, and that really has, over the years, subsided quite a bit. You haven't heard it in the national news like you did at that one point.
No, you really haven't. The EPA was doing a study, has not come out, but a myriad of states have done studies. In Massachusetts, there have been 3, including this one, cases before the DEP. One was Fenn School, one was the town of Wilmington. The hearings officer in our case, when we went through the appeal process, actually asked us, after all the evidence was presented, to go to the Fenn School. Actually, they asked DEP Western Region, go to the Fenn School, go to the Wilmington School. I want the results of the test waters coming off of their field. Nothing. So Massachusetts has been active in it as well, and has concluded that there's just no risk. And in fact, many studies conclude that the turf fields are safer. And they're certainly safer from a player standpoint. Right. So if you look at the field that was there before, that had been there for a dozen years, it had grown to be somewhat uneven. Yes. So you're risking ankle injuries, knee injuries, those kinds of things, which you don't see on the turf field.
Interesting. One of the things I found very interesting about the field itself was when I walked on it, and I had known that there was going to be these little pieces of rubber, but they when you run, they sort of pop up at you a little bit. And I'm curious, Beth, from a maintenance standpoint, like how do you get all of those chrome pieces like back in once they've popped out?
So there's a couple different machines that we use, and we're told from the turf field company when to use them, but it almost serves as almost a vacuum that then goes back in. So so we know when to do the maintenance on that. And again, you made a great analogy with a carpet, but that's what we would do, you know, keep the carpet clean at home, and we treat that the same way in the turf field. So yeah.
Interesting.
So
and actually the carpet that we chose has an impact on that because we're now into the 4th generation of turf field technology.
So this is like iPhone 4,
yeah,
but it's turf.
I played on the BU field in lacrosse when I was in college. It was basically tar, asphalt with a carpet on it, right? The original AstroTurf. So that you now have much better protection from an impact standpoint. But the particular the particular carpet that we selected is what's called a dual fiber carpet. So it has straight fibers and has fibers that are split. And the split fibers tend to curve over and act more like natural grass, so that infill has less of a tendency to pop up. because you've got some of the fibers that are curved over.
So when an athlete is playing on the field, do they notice a real difference between playing on an artificial turf field versus playing on a natural field, or do they actually feel the same?
I think it probably depends upon the sport. So football, probably less of a difference. Soccer, the ball's going to roll more consistently. I've heard from children that played on the field that, wow, it's a lot faster.
Yes.
Lacrosse, again, I think the surface is more consistent. The bounce of the ball, if you're shooting a bounce shot at the goal, may bounce a little differently, but again, it's going to bounce more consistently. And probably a little faster running, but otherwise not.
Now, you talked about soccer for men's and women's, lacrosse men's and women's, and football, but it's been used in other ways, right?
It's been used in a variety of ways. What I think is the most fascinating and coolest event we had this fall was a powder puff football game, which was arranged by one of our faculty members.
And what is powder puff, Beth?
It's a women's football game, all women. And it was the largest spectator day that we recorded at the college.
Sounds like fun.
It was really fun, and so that was something unique. We also obviously we have the men's and women's Pittsfield Public Schools soccer, as well as all the football games and the JV games. Our own BCC soccer team played on it, which was great the night you went there. Their maiden voyage, they were so proud. And we have a youth football league that plays on it. The YMCA soccer, the young children, their program, the little ones, they played on it. And oh my God, they were so excited. And then we have this Black Rock Soccer, which is a normal league in the county. They're still playing on it. They're booked through the end of November. So in our cross country team, because we had a lot of weather this fall, they weren't able to run where they wanted to. So they run the inside of the field. They run along the inside of the field for practice. So and our students love. We now open it up to our students. Our soccer team can go in there and practice when it's not an official practice, or at this time of year. They were supposed to have a game yesterday, our soccer team and some other students, a pickup game, but it was too cold. So they
were inside yesterday.
They were inside.
I
they
saw
played.
that photo.
But we're open. Our staff at Patterson is really open to any ideas, any thoughts. Just come and talk to us, because it's really opened our doors to the community in a variety of ways. In our first football game, one of the things we thought, we need locker rooms, right? So we have 2 locker rooms. We cleaned them out, we fixed them up, and so we've done a lot of work in Patterson based on this to make it even better. So for us, it was also a win-win.
I love it. I love it. So when you think about the time that now students have the ability to play on the field, you said that we were supposed to have a game just yesterday. We could have done it yesterday. How normal is that? I mean, when do we normally start saying, oh, we can't use fields anymore? And what does this kind of do as far as, no pun intended, a game changer?
Well, it is. It's interesting that Berkshire County was the only county in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that didn't have this kind of facility for youth and high school sports available to it. Yet, we have the most harsh winter conditions. So I would say on average, we've got 2 more weeks of winter on the front side, 2 more weeks of winter on the back side than the rest of the Commonwealth. And some, if you're closer to the ocean, have hardly, a downtime at all. So this allows students here to play that extra time. And if there's snow on the field in February and the lacrosse team wants to be practicing, the snow can be removed. It takes a short while after. You leave about an inch on the field, and they can be playing on the field. So it really opens up availability. And another point that was critical is the MIAA, the Mass Interscholastic Athletics Association, which oversees high school sports and playoffs, requires this kind of facility to host any kind of playoff. So our teams in Berkshire County, if they make a playoff in soccer or football, they're traveling to Westfield or Chicopee or someplace else outside the area to play their playoff games, because that's what the MIA requires. When we're done, we've got a few more things to finish. when we're done, this facility will qualify for those kinds of playoffs.
Wow.
Yep.
And we only have about a minute left, but I know you had some folks you wanted to acknowledge and thank.
Oh, sure. I mean, the critical thing that made this happen is our group of donors and our group of volunteers. So the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, through our delegation, came in with $1.1 million early on in the game. The Feigenbaum Foundation, Milltown Capital, the City of Pittsfield, Berkshire Bank, early adopter, right out of the gates, Berkshire Community College, Greylock Federal Credit Union, the College Foundation, Yankee Barbarata, Fitzpatrick Trust, Pittsfield Cooperative Bank, the Soccer Club, Kickoff Classic, Lee Bank, and a whole host of others. I'll mention a couple that jump out. Bill Belichick Foundation, Coach Bill Belichick from
I
the
went and
Patriots.
picked up that check, by the way.
Oh.
That was very cool.
And a host of other supporters. And I also have to mention, our core group, Gary Bianchi, who, as I said, reached out early on. He was then the coach of St. Joe's football. He experienced that 2011 season with field unavailability. Sheriff Bowler, Fran Marinaro, the Register of Probate, Jim McGrath from the city, and Ellen Kennedy and her entire staff, you included, and Beth included, who were essential to this project.
Well, thank you both. We're out of time. It
You're
goes
welcome.
quick. I appreciate
I know.
you being on the show, and we will have them back to talk about the next phases that are happening with the field, press box, lights, scoreboard. So thank you all for joining in for another edition of Access Higher Ed.
Thank you.